There is very little room for error here. A missed step, a late reaction, a second too slow. Sometimes that's all it takes. It ends almost as quickly as it began. This is life on the African savanna, where every animal has its own way of surviving. The dust settles first. Then the sound comes back, breathing, slower now. The grass still moving where bodies passed through it a few moments ago. A lion can sleep, or something close to it, for the better part of a day. This isn't laziness. A body built for short, explosive effort doesn't get much use from moving around unnecessarily, so mostly it doesn't bother. They rest properly, on their backs, on their sides, tangled together in a heap of paws and tails, as if the whole pride has simply run out of reasons to move. This is when the group looks most like a family, because in most ways it is one. Lions are unusual among cats. Most of their relatives live and hunt alone, but lions gather. A pride is usually built around a group of related females, sisters, mothers, daughters, who tend to stay together for life, along with their cubs and a smaller number of resident males who defend the territory around them. There's grooming here, a tongue working through fur, an ear tugged, a head resting against another's shoulder. It looks affectionate, and in its way, it is, but it's also useful. These bonds are part of what allows a pride to hold on to its territory, to raise cubs communally, and, when the moment comes, to bring down prey that no single lion could manage alone. The males tend to keep more to themselves, a little apart from the rest, though they're rarely far. Their role isn't really about hunting, that falls mostly to the females, but about holding the territory itself and keeping other lions, particularly other males, out of it. It's a job that can look like doing very little, right up until it doesn't. The cubs don't understand any of that yet. To them, a tail is a toy, an ear is a target, and the whole pride is just a warm, patient obstacle course to climb over and fall off of. The adults are harder to read. So much of what a lion does isn't visible at all, a shift in the wind carrying some scent from further off. A bird lifting away for no clear reason. The way a distant herd bunches up or stops feeding, slightly earlier than it should. A lion lying flat in the grass, doing what looks like nothing, is often paying close attention to exactly this kind of small, ordinary detail. There's a lot of ground out there to take in. The plains run flat and pale under the heat, grass bending in long waves whenever the wind moves through. There's nowhere to hide a herd of 1,000 animals, and nowhere to fully hide a lion either. Herds tend to stay close together, which means more eyes watching in more directions at once. Grass, in places, grows tall enough to hide even a large animal, if it knows how to move through it slowly. By midday, heat rising off the ground blurs anything at a real distance, which tends to suit a hunter rather more than it suits something grazing. Everything out here, in one way or another, is shaped by how far you can see and how far you can be seen. Something changes. A lioness who looked half asleep a moment ago is suddenly alert. Her weight shifts forward, off her back legs. Whatever had her attention before is gone now. There's movement out there, and for the moment, that's the only thing that matters. She won't run yet. The chase itself, when it comes, is usually the shortest and least important part of the whole process. Long before that, there can be minutes, sometimes a good deal longer, spent simply closing the distance using whatever cover the ground happens to offer. A fold in the land, a patch of taller grass. Lions aren't built for a long chase. She needs to get this right. One mistake and the chance is gone. Whether this particular stalk leads anywhere is impossible to say in advance. The wind can shift. One animal can happen to glance up at the wrong moment, and the whole thing is over before it starts. Most attempts like this don't end in a kill. That's simply how it tends to go. Somewhere else on the same stretch of plain, another predator is working through the same basic problem: how to cross open ground that offers almost nowhere to hide, and has arrived at a very different answer. Where the lion relies on patience, cover, and strength held back until the last moment, this one relies on something else almost entirely: raw speed and not much else. A cheetah rarely has the strength to overpower prey the way a lion can, and it usually hunts alone. So its whole approach has to be different. Less about force, more about picking the right moment and committing to it. Much of a cheetah's day has nothing to do with running at all. It sits upright in the grass or stands on a slight rise, scanning the ground ahead. Open country suits this kind of hunting. There's little cover to hide behind, so a cheetah leans more on eyesight than concealment, watching a herd, watching the spaces between animals, waiting for something to separate from the rest. Most of what a cheetah does, most of the time, looks like this: sitting, watching, walking a short distance and sitting again. The sprint that made it famous takes up only a small part of its day. The land itself plays a part in this. Open grassland gives a clear line of sight, which matters more to a cheetah than it does to a lion. Antelope and gazelle graze in loose groups across the plain, alert, lifting their heads every so often to check the ground around them. Not every stretch of country here looks the same. There are patches of scrub, low rises, thicker grass in places. But wherever the ground opens up, visibility becomes the deciding factor for both sides. A cheetah's body is built around this one particular skill. The limbs are long, the spine unusually flexible, letting the whole body stretch and coil with each stride. It's a light animal for its size, which helps with acceleration, though it costs something in raw power. The tail is long and works almost like a rudder, helping the cheetah adjust direction mid-run without losing its footing. The claws stay only partly retracted, more like a running shoe than a cat's usual retractable claws, giving extra grip at speed. None of this matters much at rest. It only becomes obvious once the chase begins, and cheetahs are, by a clear margin, the fastest land animals alive, though that speed only holds for a short burst before the body simply can't sustain it any longer. Something shifts in the herd. One animal drifts a little further from the others than it should. The cheetah has already seen it. The approach is careful at first, a slow walk, pausing, using what little cover there is. Then the distance closes, and there's a point where waiting stops making sense. The run itself is short but violent. Rapid changes of direction matter as much as raw speed because prey rarely runs in a straight line. A cheetah can alter course sharply, mid-stride, in a way few other animals can match. Whether this ends in a kill isn't something to assume. More often than not, it doesn't. A sudden turn, a head start, a stumble in the grass, and the chase is over before it properly began. Afterward, there's a cost to be paid either way. A cheetah after a full sprint is often left standing or lying flat, chest heaving, for several minutes before it can do much else. That kind of effort takes a serious physical toll, and recovery isn't optional. It has to happen before anything else can follow, hunting or otherwise. Cheetah society, such as it is, tends to be simple. Females are usually on their own, except when raising cubs, while males will sometimes stay together in small groups, often brothers, for much of their lives. It's a different arrangement from the lion's crowded pride, suited to an animal that depends less on numbers and more on staying light and unencumbered. Between the lion and the cheetah, two very different solutions to the same open ground. But predators like these, for all the attention they draw, make up only a small part of what actually lives out here. Most of the plain is occupied by something far less dramatic. Herds moving slowly across the grass, heads down, heads up, watching, feeding, staying close to one another, going about the long, unremarkable business of simply getting through the day. A head goes down to feed, comes up again a moment later. down, up, a rhythm that repeats itself for most of the day, because grazing here means constant interruption. Every few mouthfuls, there's a pause, a look around, ears swiveling towards some sound that may or may not matter. Those ears do a lot of the work. They move independently, picking up sound from different directions at once, which helps make up for the fact that no single zebra can watch every angle at the same time. That's part of why zebras tend to stay in groups. More eyes, more ears, spread across a wider stretch of ground, catching things a lone animal would easily miss. Look closely at the coat, and no two patterns are quite the same. Every zebra carries its own arrangement of stripes, as distinct as a fingerprint. For a long time, the obvious explanation was camouflage, breaking up an animal's outline against predators. The evidence for that has never been especially strong. What the research does support more consistently is something less dramatic. The stripes seem to make it harder for biting flies to land cleanly, which for an animal without much natural defense against insects may matter more than it first appears. Family groups tend to hold together, typically a stallion, several mares, their young, moving and grazing as a unit over months or years. A foal can stand within its first hour of life and be moving with the group not long after, which matters a great deal in open country where staying with the herd is safer than falling behind it. Most of a zebra's day, in the end, comes down to eating. Their digestive system handles coarser, more fibrous grass less efficiently than some other grazers, but it processes it faster, which lets zebras feed on tougher vegetation that others tend to leave behind, often clearing a path that finer grazers follow behind them. Seen from a distance, individual animals start to disappear into something larger. Small family groups drift toward other groups. Zebras graze alongside wildebeest, alongside antelope, spreading out across the same stretch of grassland, until what's on screen is no longer a handful of animals, but a landscape full of them, and the story of survival out here becomes as much about the herd as about any one animal in it. Small groups keep meeting other small groups until, from a distance, they stop looking like individuals at all. What's on the ground now is a herd, sometimes a few dozen animals, sometimes several thousand, spread across the grass in loose, shifting clusters. There's a practical logic to gathering like this. More animals means more chances that something notices trouble before it gets close. A raised head here, a sudden turn there. Information passing through the group faster than any single animal could gather it alone. If a predator is stalking a herd rather than one isolated animal, it also has more targets to choose from and more difficulty picking one out cleanly, which can work in any individual's favor, at least statistically. None of this makes an animal safe. It shifts the odds a little. Numbers come with costs too. More mouths means more competition for the same patch of grass, and a large herd can strip an area bare in days that would otherwise have lasted much longer. Disease and parasites move more easily between animals standing close together than between animals spread far apart. And a herd doesn't act as one mind. It acts as many individuals reacting to each other, which means a false alarm from one edge of the group can send the whole thing moving for no real reason at all. What looks, from a distance, like a single organized mass is really just a lot of separate decisions happening close together and close in time. Different species often share the same stretch of ground without much obvious coordination. Zebras, wildebeest, gazelles, sometimes buffalo or giraffe, all grazing the same general area, each paying attention in a slightly different way, and each getting something slightly different out of the land itself. Zebras will often work through taller, coarser grass first, opening up the ground beneath it. Wildebeest and gazelles tend to follow behind, feeding on the shorter growth left over, which suits their preference for younger, more tender grazing. There's no coordination behind this, no plan. It's simply how each species happens to feed, and one ends up preparing the ground for the next almost by accident. A giraffe sees over a wider range than an animal down in the grass, picking up movement from much further off. A gazelle may notice a low shape moving through cover that a zebra would miss entirely. When one group startles and breaks into a run, animals nearby tend to notice and react, even without seeing whatever caused it in the first place. Proximity doing the work that cooperation would otherwise have to. None of this holds still for long. Grass thins out where it's been grazed hard and thickens somewhere else after rain that fell a valley over. Herds spread out to feed, come back together to move, then spread out again, following conditions that shift from one season to the next, and sometimes from 1 week to the next. Where migration happens at a large scale, it tends to follow this same basic pattern many times over, not one dramatic march, but an accumulation of smaller decisions, animal by animal, herd by herd, drifting toward wherever the grass currently makes sense. Some of these movements cover enormous distances over the course of a year. Others amount to little more than shifting a few kilometers between one valley and the next. All that movement changes the ground itself in small ways that add up. Grazing keeps certain plants cropped low, which can encourage different grasses to grow than would otherwise dominate. Trampling opens paths and disturbs soil, sometimes helping seeds take hold in places they wouldn't have reached on their own. Dung and urine put nutrients back into ground that would otherwise stay poorer for longer, and over time, well-used grazing routes can end up shaping the vegetation around them almost as much as rainfall does. Younger animals move within all of this almost from the start. A calf or foal has to learn quickly to stay close to an adult and to move the instant the group moves, because falling behind, even briefly, changes its odds considerably. Most spend their first days or weeks close to a parent's side, matching pace long before they're capable of doing much else. Grass can be found across enormous distances, more of it in some seasons than others, but food alone isn't enough to live on. Water is a separate problem, and not every species needs the same amount or can go the same length of time without it. As the ground dries out, the places holding water don't dry out evenly. Some pools and rivers keep running longer than the country around them. And that unevenness starts pulling animals toward fewer and fewer locations. That's usually where a waterhole earns its reputation. Animals that might otherwise be scattered across kilometers of open plain end up sharing the same muddy stretch of ground at the same time of day. Zebras stand at the edge in loose lines. Wildebeest crowd in beside them, kicking up dust as they jostle for space. Antelope hang back a little longer before committing to drink. Elephants wade in more directly, drawing water up through the trunk and pouring it into the mouth rather than drinking through the trunk itself. Giraffes have the hardest time of it. Their legs and neck aren't proportioned for bending down easily, so they have to splay or fold their front legs awkwardly just to reach the surface, a position that leaves them slower to react than usual. If that's the trade-off a waterhole represents, it's necessary and it's convenient, and it also puts a lot of animals in one place with their guard partly down, heads lowered to drink instead of raised to watch. Most species deal with this by taking turns, by drinking in short bursts, by lifting their heads every few seconds out of habit as much as anything else. Birds often gather at the same edges too, feeding on insects stirred up by the larger animals moving through the mud. For a while, whatever else separates these animals, species, size, how they graze, how they move, falls away at the water's edge. Different lives, briefly sharing the same narrow stretch of mud and reflection, before each one moves on to wherever it was going next. An elephant at the water's edge doesn't drink the way most of the animals around it do. The trunk dips in, draws water up, and only then curls back to release it into the mouth. Several liters at a time, repeated again and again until it's had enough. The trunk itself is worth pausing on. It's really the nose and upper lip, stretched and fused together over evolutionary time into something with no bone in it at all, just muscle, an enormous number of individual muscle units working together, which is what gives it both real strength and remarkably fine control at the same time. The same trunk that can tear a branch off a tree or shove another elephant aside can also pick out a single blade of grass or press gently against a calf's side, or lift to test the air for a scent carried in from somewhere out of sight. Away from the water, most of an elephant's day comes down to eating grasses, leaves, bark, roots, whatever branches are within reach. The exact mix depends on the season and what's available. It's a lot of vegetation, and moving through it leaves a mark. Branches broken, bark stripped from trunks, dense thickets opened up into something an elephant or anything else can walk through more easily. Up close, it can look almost destructive. Its real effect is wider than that. Elephants change the vegetation around them enough that other animals end up living somewhat differently because of it. Grazers benefiting from paths opened through thick brush, some plants pushed back while others get room to grow. Those ears aren't just for hearing, they're large enough to be one of the more obvious features on the animal, and threaded through with blood vessels close to the surface. Flapping them helps move heat away from the body, though it's only one part of how an elephant manages the day's temperature. Shade helps. water and mud help more. Standing still in the hottest part of the day helps as much as anything. Family groups tend to center on related females and their calves, often led in practice by an older female whose familiarity with the landscape, where water holds later into a dry season, which routes are safer, which areas to avoid, can matter a great deal to the group around her. Communication between elephants happens through touch, through smell, through calls, and through very low sounds pitched below what a human ear can pick up, some of which can travel a considerable distance across open ground under the right conditions. A calf stays close to an adult almost constantly, picking up most of what it knows simply by staying near enough to watch. Much of what happens after that is unremarkable to look at: walking, feeding, standing in shade, a trunk exploring something in the grass without any particular urgency. That's most of an elephant's life, and it doesn't need dressing up to hold attention. Scale like this is hard to miss, but not everything on this landscape announces itself the same way. Lower down, closer to the ground, in the same grass an elephant's feet pass over without much notice, a great deal else is going on. A tall bird moves through the grass on foot, unhurried, more like something walking a fence line than hunting. It could fly. For now, it doesn't. Most of a secretary bird's hunting happens exactly like this, on the ground, covering long stretches of open savanna step by step, head tilting down every so often to check something in the grass. The diet is broader than its reputation suggests. Insects, small mammals, lizards, other small vertebrates, and yes, sometimes snakes. But snakes are only one part of what it's after, not the whole point of the animal. The legs are the real story here. Unusually long for a bird, and strong enough to deliver a fast, forceful downward stamp when something in the grass turns out to be worth the effort. Dangerous prey, especially where keeping the rest of the body at a distance matters. A layer of thick scales along the lower legs offers some protection against a bite, though not immunity. It's a tool for managing risk, not eliminating it. Everything else about the bird sits a little oddly against those legs. It's built for walking most of the day across ground that would exhaust most other birds its size, and yet it can fly perfectly well when it needs to, usually at the end of the day, heading for a tree to roost in rather than spending the night on open ground. The loose crest of dark feathers at the back of the head moves with each step, more visible in profile than face on. Much of what there is to see is exactly this: walking, pausing, looking down, moving on. No strike is guaranteed, and most steps lead to nothing in particular. That's simply how the search goes, on foot, across ground this size. A warthog manages the same search differently, low enough that its head sits almost level with the grass itself. To get there, it will often drop forward onto its front wrists, resting on the thickened, calloused patches there, rather than kneeling on the knee itself, and shuffle forward in that position while grazing. It looks awkward. It works well enough that the animal does it for a large part of the day, keeping its mouth close to short grass without having to bend its neck the way most grazers do. Grass makes up most of the diet when it's available, though warthogs will also dig for roots and bulbs, or take fruit when conditions call for it. The tusks are hard to miss in any close-up. Their enlarged canine teeth, the upper pair curving outward and up, more visible and more commonly photographed, while the lower canines are smaller but sharper and do most of the actual work if the animal needs to defend itself. The fleshy pads on the face, often called warts, aren't warts at all. They're thickened tissue, more pronounced in males, and appear to offer some cushioning during the head-to-head clashes that happen between rival males. Females tend to stay in small groups with their young, sometimes called sounders, while adult males spend much of the year on their own, only coming together with females during breeding periods. Piglets stay close to an adult early on, following at a trot to keep pace when the group moves. When a warthog runs, it tends to do it with its tail held straight up, stiff and vertical, an easy detail to notice even at a distance. Most of the time, though, there's no reason to run at all, just feeding, walking, wallowing in mud when it's available, head down, unhurried. Feeding this close to the ground is one way to make a living on these plains. The head rides well above it on the next animal, a neck long enough to see over most of what's around it, taking in far more of the landscape than anything feeding at ground level ever could. It's a bird that spends its whole life on the ground. Flight isn't part of the plan here. The body is built instead for covering distance on foot, which it does for most of its waking hours, feeding as it goes. The diet leans heavily on plant material, seeds, grasses, leaves, whatever the season offers, with occasional insects and other small food picked up along the way. The legs do most of the work, and they're worth a closer look. Long, powerful, and ending in a foot with only 2 toes, which sets it apart from almost every other bird alive. One toe is considerably larger than the other and carries most of the weight when the bird moves, while the smaller one adds a little extra stability. Less mass at the far end of the leg makes each stride easier to complete quickly, which is part of what allows an ostrich to cover ground at real speed and hold that pace for a surprising distance, not just in short bursts. That height serves another purpose too. A raised head has a clear line of sight across open country, further than most other grazing animals can manage. And when an ostrich reacts to something in the distance, nearby zebras or antelope often pick up on it, even without seeing the same thing themselves, one alert animal's behavior spreading outward to the others around it. The same pattern that shows up again and again across this landscape. Breeding here can get complicated. Several females sometimes lay eggs in the same nest, with one dominant female and a male typically taking on most of the incubating. It's an unusual arrangement, though it doesn't need to be seen to be understood. Mostly what fills the day is simpler than that. Walking, feeding, scanning the ground ahead, moving among other grazing animals without much urgency at all. A bird this size, standing this tall, still spends most of its life doing very little that would count as remarkable on its own. And as the light shifts later into the day, that single ostrich becomes just one more shape moving across a much larger stretch of grass. One animal among the many others also out there, feeding, walking, watching, on the same open plain that has carried this whole story from the beginning. That same plain has carried every story so far. A lion waiting low in the grass, a burst of speed lasting only seconds, hundreds of animals moving together before breaking apart again, a crowded gathering at the water's edge that thinned out within the hour. None of these animals live the same way. Some hunt, most spend their days simply looking for enough to eat. Some travel in groups too large to count. Others go long stretches entirely alone. Some can barely last a day without water. Others can cross this ground for weeks without needing much at all. And yet, it's the same ground beneath all of it. The same grass, worn down and grown back. The same light, moving from morning through to this. As the sun drops lower, the shapes on the plain start to lengthen, then blur into silhouette. A line of animals crossing in the distance, birds cutting low before settling, the wind picking up just enough to move everything at once. Very little of what happens here is dramatic on any given day. Mostly it comes down to this: finding food, covering ground, staying alert, resting when it's safe to, and doing it all again tomorrow. What's remarkable isn't any single moment. It's that all of it is happening together, right now, across the same stretch of land. The grass keeps moving long after the animals have gone.